Broadcasting from Silicon Valley, California, this is Conversations with Jennylyn.
You are watching Conversations with Jennylyn, and today my guest, Lal Balkaran, is not a stranger to my show. He has been on here before. He is FCPA, FCGA, a CIA, seasonal risk governance and internal audit consultant, and a lot more. Lal is a Guyanese born Canadian, and today I've invited him back to my show because he did a documentary on what was formerly known as British Guyana. It is now a republic and it's my home country. And so I thought it would be nice to bring him to share some of our history with you. I have a voice today that sounds like I swallowed a frog. I didn't. It's the results of too much fun at the wine tasting yesterday. So hopefully you can hear what I'm saying. Lal, welcome to Conversations with Jennylyn a second time.
Thank you, Jenny. It's good to be here as well, and good to be talking to you again.
Well, you did a documentary on Guyana, and I thought it was really well done. And I was very proud of you because I'll make an admission on this camera now. You taught me some stuff about Guyana I did not know. And so I have a lot of friends who are curious about Guyana and its culture. So I thought it would be great to have you share some of it. The the most important things that you captured in the documentary with us.
Okay, there are 5 documentaries I did. The most recent one was on the Amerindians, which was just posted a week ago on YouTube. But prior to that, a couple of months ago, last year, I did a 4-series geography of Guyana. And each series focuses on one geographic region. For instance, series 1 dwells on the coastland, which stretches from Waini all the way to the Corentyne River. And then series 2 deals with the hilly sandy belt area, which covers the hilly sandy clay area, including the bauxite mining town of Linden, as well as Kwakwani and Berbice. Series 3 covers the forested region, which takes over 90% of Guyana. And series 4 covers the savannas, the Rupununi, to me the most beautiful part of the country, with the mountains, the waterfalls, the savannas, the rivers. When you're in the Rupununi, you feel as if you're part of Latin America and not the Caribbean, and not part of the coastline. But the last documentary I did was on the Amerindians, and that dwells on the 9 tribes that we have there, showing their geographic distribution, their cultural activities, the way they live, the way they farm, and everyday living.
So one of the fascinating things about Guyana are the Amerindians for some of my friends here, because I've explained that the Amerindians are American Indians who have been a very big part of Guyana. Could we start with the Amerindians? Because so many of my friends are Americans and are wondering how American Indians got there.
Right. Well, the Amerindians are the first inhabitants of Guyana. They were there for thousands of years. And there were over 80 tribes at the turn of the 19th century. But they're extinct now, and now we just have 9 tribes that are scattered from Waini all the way to the deep south in YY country on the border with Brazil. So the Amerindians, they occupy 90% of the country, and they live in remote villages. But they know all the trails, they know all the forest medicines. They have actually enabled our explorers to go to the remote parts of Guyana to look at the boundary demarcation with Venezuela, Brazil, and Suriname. So they're the first people there. We can learn a lot from them. You know, casserie, they gave us casserie, which is the base for pepper pot, right? They gave us a lot of food items that we hardly stop to think about, like the simple cassava bread that we take for granted as well. That can go for months without being refrigerated and is still healthy. So our Amerindian, they're about 12% of the population of about 780,000 people now. So they number close to 90,000. But they're the first inhabitants, and there's so much we can learn from them. They gave us names like the Benab. They gave Guyana is a Amerindian word. It means watery, land of many waters. And they gave us a lot of other names that we use in our everyday lexicon, but we never recognize.
And so one of the species were the Caribs, right? And they were
That's right.
cannibals.
Well, that's what we are told in the history books, right? But the Caribbean, you have some of them in Dominica, in the Caribbean, but some of them live in the Barama area, the Northwest area. But you live among the Caribbean and they're peaceful. I mean, you would never think they were cannibals, as we are told, right? I mean, the entire Caribbean got its name from...
Is that erroneous?
Well, there's some debate over it. There's some, just like the debate over Columbus landing here in October 1492. Not many historians are willing to accept that. We still have people who claim the Africans came here first, the Chinese came here first, but it was never recorded. So cannibalism, it's debatable, but that's what we are told in the history books.
Well, but how did they get there? That's what I'm unclear. How did they get there in the first place? Because their name, Amerindians, I was told growing up, is because they're American Indians.
Right.
Somehow wandered down to that part of the world.
Well, we can even go beyond there and say that they all came from Asia. They all have the Mongoloid features from Alaska right down to Chile. All the native Indians have these Mongoloid features. We are told that over 40,000 years ago, they came through the Bering Strait from the Asia to the American continent. And then over the years, they migrated from Alaska all the way to Chile. Then they spread out through the Americas. Our tribes, for instance, migrated from Brazil and other parts of South America and dwelled in Guyana. Once they reached the shores of Venezuela, Colombia, Guyana, and the Guyana and French Guyana, they spread out to the Caribbean and inhabited the Caribbean islands. So that's how we have the Arawaks and the Caribs that were in the Caribbean at the time when Columbus landed there in October 1492. It was the Taino Indians in the Hispaniola, which is now the Dominican Republic and Haiti, that gave us, that Columbus first encountered. But they were a part of the Arawaks.
I remember as a young child, I grew up in the Northwest District, and my father worked for the government, and he used to go into their reservations.
Right.
From the distance, you could see a lot of them. But as soon as they heard my father's Land Rover, they disappeared. And they would run and hide in trees. And most of them were still sort of primitive in the way they dressed and lived. And do you know if that is still true today? Because I left Guyana a long time ago.
No, well, not really. I mean, today we have the era of technology, technological advancements. And you would believe that some remote tribes in the Amazon have iPhone, they're on the internet, right? So the internet has changed up the way they dress.
Wow.
Right. And right now, I mean, I can communicate with some of my friends in the Rupununi and in the deep south of Guyana through an iPhone and through the internet. So they would dress in their traditional dresses for cultural events, like the Parishara dance, for instance, Moni Patamona in the Pacoraimas. They only dress like that for tourism, for cultural events, for national events, and but they dress like you and I today. I mean, there's an Amerindian beauty contest every year, and with the movement of people of all races around Guyana, there's a mixture between different races, between Chinese and Amerindians, East Indians and Amerindians, Africans and Amerindians. So it's almost like a cook-up among Amerindians now. It's difficult to find a pure one among the 9 tribes, but they are there.
Right. So if you're watching this show and you're not Guyanese, a cook-up is a dish in Guyana we make where you put peas and rice and everything that you could possibly put in that pot. It's one dish. So when we refer to a cook-up, we mean all-inclusive.
That's right.
So now that they have become modernized, I think that is kind of sad, because I used to love going into their villages where they lived in thatch roof houses that didn't even have walls.
That's right.
And they hunted for a living.
Right.
And they did everything that we've known of the historical times, when you only use herbs when you were ill. And
that's right.
Maybe another show we could go into some of what I know were their forms of medicine. But I thought it really lended so much culture to Guyana to be able to drive into those villages and see people still living like that. But
yeah, true. They do. I mean, you go now, the way they fish, they use hooks, nets, but they also use their traditional. There's a seed, a vine from a tree in the jungle. They just hung it up and they throw it in the water. And then that deprives the water of oxygen. So the fish come floating at the top and you just pick them up. You call that vine, it's called kunam. So that's the traditional way that they still do for fishing. And they also understand the herbs they use for everyday medicine. I mean, in some remote villages, it's difficult to get to a government hospital or a dispensary. So they still depend on their forest products for everyday ailments. I remember when I lived there in the 70s in the Rupununi, when I used to get fevers, one Amerindian friend will bring some tobacco leaves, green leaves, burn it under my hammock, and the smoke and covered the entire hammock. Afterwards, I felt quite relieved, back to normal. So
I love that because, I mean, now today we have medicines, we have drugs.
Right.
You take a pill for this and it helps you for your particular ailment. But sometimes it could cause something else, right?
That's right.
And so back in those days, it wasn't like that. But of course, they lacked the sophistication of X-rays and all of that.
Oh, yeah.
Somehow they survived.
Well, that's right.
So I feel blessed and privileged to have grown up where I grew up and be exposed to that.
Right.
I remember one time I was going home from the city where I was going to nursing school.
Right.
On a chopper. And the weather was bad. And the pilots had to veer off track. We ended up somewhere in Venezuela in one of those reservations. And I remember the chopper was running out of fuel. It was very scary.
Oh.
And we were the pilots were looking for a place to set it down to refuel. And, Guyana, I was on a military aircraft. And in Guyana, a military aircraft should not be in Venezuela, but we were.
That's right.
So it was kind of really touchy. And we ended up trying to land in a place where the people's homes started blowing away. I was devastated.
That's right.
Eventually, we found a waterfall and they kind of hovered the craft on a rock and refueled it to get us to where we were going, which is where my parents lived. And I remember thinking, what genius that they were able to do that and save our
That's
lives. Yeah. When I tell this story, I think people think I saw some movie but it happened. It really
happened,
did. And I always say I would never change my childhood from growing up in Guyana, ever.
It's a rich experience. When I left high school, I was just 17 when I went to the Rupununi. My first job in my whole life, living on a thatched roof with mud walls, no electricity, no plumbing, outside latrine, right? So to live like that for 5 years was quite defining and humbling for me, and I enjoyed it.
Of course.
I've documented it, right?
You documented it?
Right, yeah, I documented it
Is it
in a
one of
book.
the documentaries that you've done?
No, I did it I traced my roots back to India. And there's a chapter in that book on my life in the 5 years I spent among the Wapishan people. 5 rich years. It was
That's
there
your
that I
next-
learned.
That's
That's
your
right.
next documentary.
It's not only documentary, it's in a book form, but I will do that. That's an idea you gave me.
Good. All right.
Right.
So let's talk about your documentaries. You've done, you
Right.
said 5.
5, right.
And the first one was on?
The first 4 were on the geography of Guyana, which show the geographic description of each of the 4 regions that we have, 4 natural regions. Like the series 1 deals on the coastline, where 90% of the Guyanese live, from Wainea to Quarantine. And 10% of the people live in the rest of Guyana, which is 90% of the land, which is unexplored. But that's where the wealth of Guyana is too, in the forestry, the forest wealth, in the minerals that we have there. But hopefully that with the Georgetown to Latham Road that is now taking shape, and the British are willing to fund that, that will open up the interior to development, economic development. I mean, there's a bridge now you can drive across Brazil, the Takatu Bridge, once you reach Latham. But the road is, it's not an all-weather road. It's a laterite, and when the rain comes, it washes. It's hardly passable.
So a lot of people that I have met since I've been living in the United States and different parts of the world that I've traveled to, when they found out I am Guyanese, they often say to me, how come you're Guyanese and you're so fair? I think they confuse Ghana with Guyana. And then I have to say, different continents. There's Ghana in Africa and there's Guyana in South America. And I am from Guyana in South America. But here's the other thing I've noticed. Once I identify the country, this is what I always get following. Oh, Jonestown with the Kool-Aid.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
Or a lot of times, if they can't identify the country, I say, oh, have you heard of Jim Jones and the Kool-Aid? That was Guyana.
Right.
So we
that's
have to include this. What do you know about Jim Jones and Jonestown?
Well, I was in Guyana in November 1978 when that happened.
I was too.
Well, here you go. You were there. Well, I think maybe it's around that same time you and I met in Georgetown. But, yeah, but this November 1978, I was preparing for my final accounting exams, and that's when it happened. And lo and behold, a lot of people on the coastline for the first time, that's when they heard the name Jim Jones. The whole cult was so secretive that the majority of Guyanese did not know about it.
Well, I knew about it because it was really close to where we lived.
Right.
And my mother was friends with some of those women from Jonestown.
Right.
Because they came to Mabaruma and they set up a little shop where they sold things that people wear in America for the cold.
Right.
And they were walking down the streets in the boiling sun, dressed in these articles that didn't really go with their weather, but they were fashionably in style.
I know.
They were wearing American stuff.
I know. But it really is the wrong reputation that we got on the world stage.
Of course.
I mean, it was a cult, mass suicide cult, that turned into a movie and several books. But we were on the world stage for the wrong reason, right?
So you said it right now. Put it right for us.
Well, it was a state within a state, and it was protected by the corrupt government at the time, which was the PNC, as we know. But access to information was limited. The press freedom was extremely limited in those days in Guyana. So the bits and pieces of information we were getting was through the opposition newspapers, right? And we had to go with that. But when it blew up in November 1978, that's when, Guyanese politicians, the government were denying they ever knew these people, Jim Jones and his flock, right? So it was, there's a school of thought saying that it was an experiment in mind control controlling people's mind, because who will line up to willingly drink poison?
But then you're skirting over it because there's some details missing from this conversation. The PNC was my party. So I
Right.
can see them as corrupt, but then, people are entitled to their views on politics.
Right.
However,
Mhm.
the Jonestown residents were not Guyanese. They were all
No,
Americans.
that's right.
And the only Guyanese in that commune were children who were adopted from poor
Right.
families.
Right.
And the version of it that I got is Jim Jones came to Guyana during a time when the government was inviting Guyanese back to Guyana to help open up the interior. Because
Right.
the majority of Guyana is not inhabited.
That's correct. Right.
So Jim Jones heard about this and came to Guyana and convinced the government that
Right.
he had come to participate in that program and help us to develop our interior, which is why he selected the location that
Right.
he chose. Now, he
Right.
demonstrated that he was a man of God by holding
Right.
church service where he convinced people he was a miraculous person
Right.
who could do all these miracles and heal people.
Right.
The version of the story I got is that
Right.
they trusted him and they just let him go and do whatever.
Right. Right. Well, the thing is, I mean, he was a cult leader, right? He preyed on people's vulnerabilities and sentiments.
Right.
That's why he could get all these people to follow him in a remote part of the country that few people have access to, right? And that was well protected by the government of the day. So if his motives were not evil, why would he go to the interior where nobody could drive up
Because
there?
he was there to help develop it. He was there to help open it up. Because
Well,
I was following that story closely when I was in high school. Because Jim Jones had a program on the radio in Guyana that made Jonestown sound like a paradise. And I remember me and a bunch of my high school friends wanting to go to Jonestown in the summer to check it out. Except my father had heard of Jim Jones and told us that we were never going to Jonestown.
Right. Well, Guyana has always been on the world stage for the wrong reason, like back in the 60s during the race riots, when, there was talk that the Cubans are in Guyana. Again, we were on the world stage. JFK was in the White House back then. And, he would not tolerate another Cuba on the South American mainland.
Right.
So, that again, that was the wrong reason we were known around the world for, right? The spread of communism, which was a fallacy. And then Johnson came afterwards. And then,
But have you heard what is happening now?
Well, I follow the news. There's nothing dramatic.
So no, you are aware that the Venezuelans are threatening to...
Well, because of the oil.
Right.
We have the massive oil, not as much as they're sitting on, but it's greed, But how far will Maduro get with this is, beyond, is left to be seen. Because the world politics has now changed. The order of the power around the world has now changed. The US is on the side of Guyana.
Right.
The Western world is on the side of Guyana. The only one who backs Venezuela now is China.
Well, Guyana signed a deal with Exxon. Exxon is an American company.
That's correct, right? Yep. So
I'm a little concerned about what's happening and what could possibly happen.
Yep, I am. I'm the least concerned because the case is in front of the World Court now, which will soon hand down their judgment. And I'm sure it will be in Guyana's favor.
Can we tell people watching this what the dispute is over? Why don't you tell them?
Yeah, the dispute is Venezuela is making a fallacious claim over 83% of Guyanese territory, which is the entire archipelago, because they're saying the 1899 tribunal that determined the boundary demarcation was null and void. And it's not so. I mean, the UN has looked at this. Several authorities have looked at this and say it's not null and void. It's valid, and the demarcation of the boundary in 1899 stays as it is. That's the crux of the case.
So my concern is that the Venezuelan army alone is the size of the Guyanese population.
Right,
So if they were to follow through on their threats, it won't
right.
be good.
It won't be good, but then again, they have to look at how they will be viewed on the international scene. The US will
They
not
don't
stand by and
care,
watch that happens.
but
Right.
they don't care. Look at the chaos happening within their own country now.
Well, that's what they can do within their own country. Once they step outside of Venezuela, it's a different ballgame altogether.
I was in Guyana 2 years ago in December, shortly
Right.
after they signed the deal with Exxon,
Hmm.
and a Venezuelan ship
Right.
was in the water not far away from where the operation was being put
Oh,
together
yeah.
to start
Right.
mining the oil.
Well, they are intimidating Guyana. They captured a couple of fishermen the other day, locked them up, and they released them in the end. But it's intimidation. That's all it is.
I don't understand people, but because people are behind these things, you know?
Right.
For all these years, when I was growing up, I grew
Mhm.
up on the border of Guyana and
Right.
Venezuela, as you know.
That's right. Hmm.
Several nights, my father would come home and say to us, "You have to go to bed early tonight. You have
Hmm.
to turn all the lights off because the Venezuelans are coming to take over tonight."
Right.
And as you know,
Right.
we always had a very heavy military presence
That's right.
with Mabaruma,
Right. That's right.
protecting us in case there was an invasion. And so I
Right.
grew up as a child with this terror
Hmm.
that one
Right.
night I'll be sleeping and there'll be a Venezuelan soldier
Right.
standing over my bed with a gun in my face. And I'm
Well,
happy it never happened, but
right.
I am surprised that this many years later,
Hmm.
this is still an issue.
Well, because of the massive oil discovery offshore, that's the reason it has, come back to light. But you remember the January 2nd, 1969, there was an uprising in the Rupununi Rebellion.
I might have been too little. I don't think I remember.
Okay, but there was a Rupununi Rebellion, and it was led by the Rancho Barons, the Harts and the Melvilles of the Rupununi. But they were supported by the Venezuelans because the whole idea was to have the entire Rupununi secede from Guyana, and they were encouraged by Venezuelans.
So let's
So,
tell our viewers the amount of wealth Guyana has that we just sit on.
right,
And I think part of the reason, or I was told, it's because they're worried if they start to mine all of these riches and bring in and
right,
enrich the economy, the Venezuelans
right.
will attack us. So we have bauxite, we have
Oh, yeah,
manganese, we have oil, we have
we
gold, we have
have,
diamonds.
that's right.
What else are
Uh,
we sitting on that we don't touch?
no, we have uranium. We have quite a range of other minerals, which I have documented in the second episode. No, the first episode of my Geography of Guyana, listing all the mineral wealth that we have. And for a country with less than 1 million, that's enormous.
So it's just unbelievable, right?
Right.
That this is continued. So from your documentary, I mean, it's difficult to go through the entire documentary right now.
That's
But
right.
can you tell people watching this show, just let's
Right.
define the different regions and what they're famous for.
That's correct. Well, we have 10 regions, 10 political regions, and the whole country is divided up into that for administrative purposes. But the four-part series, which are all on YouTube, document the natural region and show the wealth for each region that people exploit and people make a living off. And they also show the natural beauty of the land. And with now ecotourism, which is, taking off at lightning speed in Guyana. And I noticed that the IMF recently said that Guyana will be the engine of growth for the entire Caribbean with its oil wealth, which mainly lie offshore. So the four-part documentary showed the economic powerhouse that Guyana is. It shows the natural beauty of each region. They show the people that live in each region as well. and show the potential that Guyana has.
And so for anyone watching this, apart from all of the wealth, Guyana has the second highest fall in the world.
Right.
Guyana has one of the highest mountain ranges in the world.
Right. That's correct, right? We have several mountain ranges. Well, Kaichor Falls is the single largest drop fall in the entire world. It's higher than Niagara. But it's the beauty in its setting with the backdrop of mountains and the forest, makes it picturesque to look at.
And the other thing that's Guyana is famous for is its rich culture.
That's correct. Well,
and we have 6 different ethnicities represented in Guyana, right?
That's correct, right?
I want to make sure we leave as much as we can for anyone watching this. Why don't you tell people where they could find your documentaries?
Well, they're all on YouTube. If you type in my name, Lal Balkaran, they're all on YouTube to find the documentaries. Or if you just Google my name, they will come up as well.
And for anyone interested, Guyana is on the tip top of the continent of South America, bordering Venezuela, Brazil, and what's her?
Suriname.
Suriname.
That's right. Suriname to the east, Venezuela to the west, Brazil to the south, right?
And it is a beautiful country that is growing.
That's right. Yep. Natural beauty with the the ecotourism, the flora and the fauna. We have so many species of birds, wood, animals, butterflies, you name them. If you're a bird lover or if you're a lover of the tropical animals, fish, different species of fish, Guyana is a place to be.
And fruits you've never heard of.
Fruits, that's right, that's right.
That's what I miss the most. We have hundreds of species of mangoes.
Oh yeah, mangoes and different kinds of tropical fruits. Some are not even grown in some parts of the Caribbean. They only can be found in Guyana.
So if you're someone watching this segment and you're trying to plan your post-COVID vacation, you should consider Guyana because it would be such a great, pardon?
I have, the documentary I did came from a book I compiled called A Photojournal of the Guyanese Amerindians. And there's another one as well. I did call it Encyclopedia of the Guyanese Amerindians. Just Google these 2 titles, and those were the basis of my doing the documentary on the Amerindians in Guyana, which I did. I traveled the length and breadth of the country. I took photographs of these people, how they live. And so they're coming from, someone with a first-hand experience.
Woohoo! I'm so glad you did that. So you can tell that I'm a really excited Guyanese, excited to share the beauty of Guyana because it's so nonchalantly hidden away. And also we are the only English-speaking country on the continent,
in South America. That's
Somebody
correct.
told me that they speak English in Belize as well. Not Belize, in there's another country, I can't think of it. But anyway, what haven't we covered, Lal, before I wrap this up?
Well, Jennylyn, you look like an Amerindian too, right? So I'm sure you have some. I'm sure down your roots you may have some kind of Amerindian blood.
No, I don't. My parents are not even Guyanese.
Oh, is that right? Okay.
My mother moved there right before I was born. So my dad is Lebanese and my mother is from Grenada. So
there you go.
No Amerindian connections.
Okay. But Guyana is a rich country, not only in a landscape, but in culture as well. We talk about its 6 ethnicities, but the Amerindians themselves, each of the 9 tribes that we have there, has their own cultural event that is unique to each other. And each has their own dance and the way they dress as well. So it's a melting pot of so many different peoples, and that makes it so enriching, cosmopolitan country.
Well, Lal, Thank you so much for sharing our culture today with my viewers. And if you are interested in learning more about this, you can look for Lal Balkaran on YouTube, and the
That's right.
documentaries, you can find them there.
Thank you.
So thank you, Lal, for taking the time, for
Right.
sharing our beautiful country of Guyana with our friends and anyone watching. And
That's right.
when you produce the next documentary, we'll do another show.
Oh, sounds good to me. Thank you, Jennylyn, for having me on.
Absolutely. And thank you for continuing to watch my show. And today, for putting up with my voice. I try to have interesting conversations because I hope to inspire and encourage you from these different stories. And in this case, provide a vacation destination for you. At
That's
least
right.
I hope we have perked your curiosity enough. If you do choose to go to Guyana, you need to take a lot of insect repellent with you. And I will see you next time. Thank you.
Thank you.
Broadcasting from Silicon Valley, California, this is Conversations with Jennylyn.